Welcome everyone to the latest Lunchtime Bites webinar from the ICBE Business Excellence SkillNet. And today our presenters are Gerry Ryan and Kieran Murphy from Xenergie on the very catchy title of What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Over 20 minutes, our two speakers will share their lifetime experience and tune into the untapped potential and talent that is within our people. By way of a quick introduction, Gerry's over 24 years of experience of manufacturing roles, from production, operation management, to HR roles and T&D before being appointed to the role of management coach. Kieran, his 20 years experience of senior leadership roles both at executive and board level in Ireland and the UK, covers a broad range of areas from discerning organizational purpose to compliance, reputation management, amongst other areas. So very quickly, the ground rules for today is that we have 20 minutes. Gerry and Kieran will switch roles during the presentation. So Gerry will take the first part, Kieran will kick in, but it'll be two presenters for today for a total of 20 minutes. Everybody is muted, but we do encourage people to send any questions that they have in through the chat function. If you hover over your screen, chat function will pop up at the bottom. And after the 20 minutes, we'll spend 5 or 10 minutes going through the questions. So this is a big area to cover. So with no further ado, I shall pass you over to Gerry Ryan. Gerry.
Thank you, Owen. Welcome, folks. So it's a pleasure to spend this 20 minutes, 30 minutes with you this Thursday afternoon with myself and Kieran. As Owen says, the title is catchy and it's also meaningful. And we won't try to answer it all now and leave the question that it poses for you in the air. So what it's saying on one level is, you know, whatever, if I'm a leader, manager, professional in organizations, in business, I've been working away and achieving what I've achieved up to now based on everything I do and know and I'm able to do now. However, it's typical that we're struggling and with challenges and problems that keep coming up and keep coming back to keep us busy. So there's something about that says, okay, what got me here is not going to get me past all this and something else is needed. So we'll touch base with that reality, if you like, in this particular presentation. And we'll also touch base with, you know, if you're a leader, professional, manager, what is this coaching approach that we're talking about? So we're saying, and the offer here is to you that a coaching approach actually could be the key to helping you to move your game, shift on, break out of whatever patterns of reality you're in now. So we'll be talking about what that coaching approach is and what it looks like and what it brings. So that's the territory we're going to chat through and work through this afternoon with you. So obviously this particular webinar is ICBE's, the Irish Business SkillNet, and Kieran and I today are representing Xenergie. So let's touch base with your experience. You know, this is stuff that we come across all the time as coaches, as leadership, working in leadership in organizations. These are typical of the situations and problems we experience or come across. So let's see how well it might touch base with your own. So one scenario is, you know, you're a manager, you're a leader at some level, and you just find yourself still involved in too much detail. The phrase I often hear is, I'm down in the weeds too much. There's something about it. Every day I'm down in the weeds too much. I know I shouldn't be there. I know it's not right. I know my role asks me to step out of the weeds and not be in them, but something is happening that draws me into it and every day. And I'm down there with the people who report to me and I'm maybe even the people who report to them. And here I am every day spending too much of my time down in the weeds, down in the detail. And we might have 2 or 3 levels of the organization all looking at and down in that same detail together. You know something is not right. It can be really frustrating. It can be really annoying. You're probably looking at the people who report to you and the organization below you and saying, why won't they look after this? Why won't they take charge of this? Why won't they do this? Why won't they do that? You're down there, you keep solving the problems with them and they keep coming back. And it might be that you're delighted down there. It might be that just suits you fine. But there's one level of reality and one typical scenario that we come across. Another one is, you know, you're maybe in a HR role, you're a HR professional. And you're there and you've managers, leaders, other folks in the business coming to you all the time. Typically what they're doing is bringing you their problems. They're bringing you their people problems and handing them over to you and leaving them on your desk and hoping and asking you to look after them. And there might be a piece of you that wants to do that, but there's some other piece of you that knows there's something wrong here. They need to be doing that and they need to be looking after that. And maybe you're trying hard to have them take that responsibility back. You're trying hard to have them do what needs to be done and do it effectively. You might be even telling them and guiding them what to do. But somehow or another, it just keeps happening. And they keep bringing them back to you and the problems keep reoccurring. And you're pretty frustrated and maybe feeling not very respected and not very valued. Again, another typical scenario we come across. And there's one there, maybe you're a senior leader in an organization. You have functional heads reporting to you. They might be doing fine functionally, so they're looking after their own functions pretty well. But what you're finding maybe are things like they're not collaborating very well. So each function head is looking after their particular function, and oftentimes that's at the expense of their peers. So they're doing things like, phrases we hear, they're throwing each other under the bus. They're passing the parcel over from one function to another. And the overall business is suffering. And maybe they're being very tactical in their approach and in their actions and not very strategic. And here you are wondering, how can I get these folks to collaborate? How can I get these folks to be more strategic? And again, you're trying this, that, and the other thing, and it's not working. And you're pretty frustrated. And you might be even a bit worried about, where's my future talent coming from if this is how these folks are at the moment? Again, another typical situation we're in and we come across. And it may be, you look at all those scenarios and you find lots of different things you might have tried. You've tried being tough. You've tried being nice. You've tried being direct. You've tried telling them what to do. You've tried hands off. You've tried hands on. You've tried a load of things. And still, it continues. So these are a typical reality in organizational life. Kieran, anything you would add into that?
Yeah, it's a couple of things, Gerry. So the kinds of things that I observe and work with people on are, that managing people and managing teams it consumes a huge amount of energy and attention for people often, and it's often the source of a lot of frustration and unmet expectation. And whether you're in a senior leadership role, middle management, or you're supporting people in management roles. So it consumes a lot of energy. The second thing is that it relates to this idea around the detail that there's such a relentless busyness in the contemporary workplace that it's really hard to find any often thinking space or space to deal and challenge or deal with more complex problems, because it takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of space, and it takes a bit of energy. But that there's such a relentless busyness, it's really, really difficult. And then the third thing is that often when people are dealing with people and managing people, they know in their heart of hearts that actually there's something missing, there's something additional they need to be considering doing. And often there's a bit of a reluctance to engage with it because there's a lot of complexity and ambiguity when you're dealing with people. They're not as simple or straightforward as sometimes we would like them to be. So they know there's something there, there's a problem, but it takes something just to step forward and say, okay, I'm going to deal with this in a different way. So it's a really challenging area for people, that managing people and managing teams.
Absolutely. And folks, today we're not going to suggest to you that a coaching approach is the answer to all of this. We are, though, going to suggest to you that a coaching approach is, in leadership terms, is fundamental to enabling that shift that Kieran referred to. So in the reality that I'm in, all the stuff that's not working, a coaching approach is a fundamental key to making a significant shift. So it's about this question, what actually needs to change? We know the definition of madness if we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So this is about we need to Need to change. Something needs to change. What is it? So here's a really key question for you, and it's a lovely coaching question, if you like it, and it's the essence of what coaching is about. What's my part in it? So this is a question for you, and it's a powerful way of beginning to experience what coaching is about. So people come to us with a situation, a problem, or whatever, you know, and this is where we end up putting our attention. What's your part in it? So, you know, you're stuck in a pattern, in lots of patterns. You're going round and round in circles. This is our reality. We've just spoken about some of them. Are you the spider that's creating that pattern and that web? Are you the bee that gets caught in it? Or what? Are you something else? What's your part in that pattern? Because you are playing a part in it. And the one thing that you have control over is changing your part. You change your part and everything else begins to change. So this is, I suppose, this question in itself says something to us about what coaching is about. It brings that clarity of challenge to us. It brings that invitation to begin to look at and think about what's going on from a different perspective. So we're going to leave you with that question. It's maybe one that you might take away with you. But what's my part in whatever is going on? So let's come to this thing which we call coaching approach, and what's that about, and what does it do? So I'll deal with one piece of it, which is about, you know, it's a way of helping people in a number of ways, and Kieran will pick up some of the actual components of it. So the first thing it helps people to do is take responsibility. Now we know and we see and we experience every day all the very subtle and not so subtle ways that people don't want to take responsibility. One way is they bring us their problems and leave them on our desks and expect us to solve them. That's a lovely way of not taking responsibility. And we're often tempted to do the solving, yeah? Which encourages them not to take responsibility. So we're now in a pattern, yeah? So we're down every day working with our people, trying to get them to take responsibility, and they have lovely, subtle, effective ways of giving it to us, and we have lovely ways of taking it and carrying it around on our backs, and then we're wondering why they won't. So coaching is a very powerful way of actually working with people in such a way that they end up taking responsibility for themselves and for what's theirs. In other words, they get up on the horse, they take the reins, and they're now doing the riding rather than you. And it does this, if you like, by being really clear about what we're about and by naming what our expectations are. Kieran referred to expectations a while ago. And by, talking about and naming what's actually going on between us. What are the patterns and how do we need to change them? So it's a fundamental way of, and a very effective way of helping people to take responsibility. And that includes me, for me. The other thing it does is helps people to clarify their thinking. So when we're caught in patterns, and we are most of the time, our thinking tends to be caught in a loop as well. We're just doing the same thinking over and over and over again. And we're finding it very difficult to stand outside it and to think differently and to see differently. So coaching is a great way to actually help people to stand outside their current ways of thinking and their current ways of seeing, and to actually start to think differently, and to actually start to see differently, and to actually, begin to access resources that are there that they're not seeing. And it's partly about space. Kieran talked about space. So it's about finding the space to do this within the hours you're already putting. So it's not looking for extra or more. It's within the time and space I actually have. What's the thing I need to change so that I can do this? The other part of a coaching approach and what it helps us do, it helps to utilize and tap into people's potential. Now, a question I ask people often in the work I do is, and think about this question for yourselves. If you think about yourself and think about the people that you're working with and the people that work for you and the people around you, in the round of a week, in the round of a month, what percentage of their potential, roughly, do you think that they're using at work? Now, when I ask that, people generally, they scratch their heads, and typical answers are in the range of 20 to 40%, which is really interesting, isn't it? So here we are, going back to what Kieran said, relentless busyness, overwhelmed, struggling, and we're only using somewhere in the order of 20 to 40% of our potential and our people's potential. We have massive potential sitting here with us, around us, and the job of leadership is to tap into it and get it out. And coaching is a key way that we do that. Not only our own, but our folks as well. So it's about helping people to shift from, ticking the box, going along for the ride, to actually go for gold. We know we have big potential and we can make it. It helps people make better decisions. If we take the other three that we've talked about, this is about people now seeing things differently, now thinking differently, now being more purposeful, being more clear about what we're trying to achieve, being able to see the wood for the trees, having the space and time and the way of thinking and the way of working and the way of engaging with what they're at that allows them to see that. For example, see the patterns. And then they begin to make much better, much cleaner, much clearer decisions, which of course drives results and drives effectiveness and drives performance in key ways. And fundamentally, all of that and this whole approach helps people to grow and develop. Because as they begin to experience themselves in new ways, and they're thinking in new ways, and they're seeing in new ways, and begin to take responsibility and begin to experience success and impact and effectiveness in this, it just encourages them to grow and grow and grow and develop and develop. And every step forward we take in terms of growth and development, we don't go backwards, if you like. Yeah? So this creates an environment where people are able to actually grow and develop and thrive. And that has severe impact and heavy impact positively on our organizations. Another piece of this, if I may, is about, for all of it together, we could say helps to shift our consciousness. So again, if I ask you, to what percentage of the time are you actually conscious? In all the decisions and in all the actions and in all the behaviors and in all the responses and in all the interactions you take every day, how much of them do you think is coming from a place of consciousness? In other words, you know and are deliberately doing what you're doing. So research here gives us interesting information. So the High Performance Institute in the States works with high-end athletes, works with CIA, FBI field agents, so people in very pressurized, challenging situations. It trains them and helps them to develop and be ready for those kinds of situations. It also researches and carries out research all the time on them. And its research suggests that the level of consciousness is about 5%. In other words, 95% of the time, we are in unconscious mode, reacting totally unconsciously to the situation. And again, think of the potential of that. Think of the potential of growing from 5% up to whatever, 20%. Wow. So this is what a coaching approach helps us to do. It helps us to shift our consciousness and grow our consciousness. And again, that has massive, powerful effects. Kieran, anything else you would throw into this slide?
Not this one, no, actually. What I might do is I'm just conscious of the time that, so we might move on to the next slide, and I'll use that as an opportunity just to make some comments.
Lovely. There we go.
So I'm imagining if I was a participant on this call, I'd be very interested in what you've been talking about, Gerry, all those really positive qualities that I could achieve with my people. So what I want to do here now is just mention very quickly just four of the key components of a coaching approach. So the first one is that a coaching approach involves a process. So it's something that takes time. It evolves over time and gets built over time. And it involves a relationship between you and the people or the team that you're working with. So it's not a quick fix, and it's not something like a tool that you can just use and be really comfortable and confident with from the outset, but it takes time to evolve. And it also requires a change in yourself as well. So it's not just about the change you're trying to impact on other people. A coaching approach also involves a set of skills and competencies, things that you do, skills that you can acquire, skills that you probably already have, but that you can evolve and you can and improve. And by those skills, I'm talking about listening. So we spend a lot of our time listening, but the quality of our listening sometimes isn't that great and can be improved. It's about giving and receiving feedback to people. This is often one of the most challenging areas for managers. How do I give constructive yet insightful and accurate feedback to the people that I'm working with, particularly around areas where they're not meeting my expectations? There's skills and competencies around setting goals and about using questions as a useful way to build awareness of the people that you're working with. The third area is it's about relationships. It's about your relationship with the people or person that you're working with. And in a coaching approach, you bring a lot of attention to what's the nature of the role that you play with people. So I sometimes hear managers saying, and they express this with a lot of frustration. They say, I feel as though I am a parent and my people I'm managing are like children sometimes. And there's a lot of frustration, but that suggests that the manager at some level is playing a parenting role. So part of a coaching approach is drawing attention to what's the nature of the relationship that you have with the people that you manage. And then the fourth piece is about you. Often when we find ourselves in really challenging situations, the first question that comes to mind, and then we reach out to others to support us, we say, what do I do about this? So the emphasis is on the doing. So I need to do something. And there's options there, and you can use skills and competencies to do that. But an equally important question is, how am I in this? So it goes back to the point Gerry was making earlier. How am I contributing to the situation? What's my part within it? So if the relationship between you and the people that you manage is to shift, then it's not just about them shifting and changing, but it's about you shifting and changing. So there are four key components of a coaching approach. We might move on, Gerry. I'm just conscious of the time. We've just got a few minutes left. If we can eat a little bit into the question and answer time. So a key part of a coaching approach, and I mentioned earlier on, is questions. So when people come to you looking for something, you use questions as a way to build their own awareness, help them get in touch with their own resourcefulness and think through the different options. So rather than providing them with your solution or whatever, it's inviting them to do a bit further thinking. So we've got a couple of questions for you that you might take away with you. What's the nature of your relationship with your manager, your peers, and those who report to you? So the likelihood is, there might be a lot of complexity to it, and there's a lot of doing and a lot of transactions, emails, decisions, meetings, and everything like that. But what's the nature of your relationship? If you had to use a metaphor, for example, do you feel like an adult, feel like a child? So what's the nature of your relationship? We all experience times when we're absolutely at our best, when we're thriving, when we're flourishing, when things are going really, really well, and we're really energized. But we also experience times when we feel that we're at our worst. So the question here is, what do you notice about the different you that shows up in those different circumstances? So the likelihood is in any given day, you might encounter several versions of me. So when I'm at my best, what kind of me is showing up? And then when I'm at my worst, what kind of me is showing up? And then thirdly, when you think about a coaching approach, what are the areas that you most need to develop? So we all are imperfectly formed and on a learning and development journey. There's always room for improvement and development. So when you think about a coaching approach, what are the areas that you most need to develop? So Gerry, you might just pop on the slide there then, please. In July, there is a coaching skills a 3-day training program called Executive Coaching Essentials, and the next slide will give you details as to how to get more information on how to book into that. So if you're interested in learning more about a coaching approach, creating a bit of space, a couple of days for yourself to really delve into it, to develop those competencies and skills, to understand how you need to develop your own awareness to shift the way you're engaging with your people. This executive coaching essentials program might be really, really helpful for you. And it explores the key elements that I spoke about earlier. I'm not going to go into detail of those because I've already mentioned it. So maybe, Gerry, you might flick then to the final slide. So there's details on the where it's on, the dates, and the times. And if you're interested in some further information, you can get it on the ICBE website.
Right. This actually nicely blends into the first question that we have, in that it answers half of it. So the first question is, what are the recommendations for people managers to develop their coaching skills? What must-read book or recommended courses? So if we take for granted the recommended course, or one of them, is the course on the 2nd, 3rd and 4th of July in the Clayton Hotel. But is there any, are there any online resources, podcasts, books? Where would you point people if they were to do some reading on the area, Kieran and Gerry?
Yeah,
any Bibles that you have come across along the way, or people?
Most of the books and Bibles, as you say, out there are geared towards professional coaching. There are some around coaching approaches in leaders. So if you Google, you'll get a whole list of books. The one thing that this little program does, which is a lovely way of dipping your toe into the water and getting enough under your belt to go away and practice. But this particular little program, the way we run it, gives you lots of time for practice. So the theory aspect of it is small. The practice aspect of it is big. So you come in, and in a safe space, you get lots of chances and lots of opportunities with a bit of feedback and plenty of time to reflect on it, of having a go and practicing the skills, the process, as Kieran has talked about. And that's fundamental, because, in your roles every day, it's not about you being a coach, it's about you being a manager who's able to practice a coaching approach. Yeah.
So, and I suppose if you look at the real world of how do people become a coach of a football team, it's the pragmatic on the field dealing with people. We have another question here. If I call that, which is, what mechanics, structures, or routines would you suggest be adopted within an organization to drive a coaching mindset? So in order to drive a coaching mindset, what structures, I suppose, how do you get it into the culture, get it so ingrained within management that it's accepted and adopted?
Yeah, if you're talking about
big question,
organizational-wide change here, you are talking about a big cultural change potentially. Yeah, and we work on this space, and many organizations do this. Yeah, so you hear organizations talking about shifting to a coaching culture. Fundamentally, it's about leadership. It's about a leadership culture. Yeah, so when we look at organizations, we can see that there's a little phrase from a piece of research that says most organizations are overmanaged and under-led. So it's making that shift to how do we actually do more leadership, because leadership is about our people and tapping into that potential of our people. So it's about that culture shift, and if it's a significant one, well, then it needs a big cultural effort led from the top. However, we are all, if you like, little islands in an organization, and we all have our own little island, which is our own little space, our own function or whatever. And you know what? I can take up the challenge of making the culture of my island a leadership culture, even though the rest of the organization and the sea around me might be quite different and stormy. So you don't have to wait for the whole organization to change. Pick it up and have a go in your own spot.
Yeah, okay, so actually, we've got an extra. Sorry, Kieran. There was just an extra addition to that, which was a small organization.
Yeah. So I think there's there's a cultural piece within the wider organization. But just to echo what Gerry's saying, I think it's about individuals, particularly people in leadership positions in an organization. What's the behaviors and attitudes that they choose to model? So there's the things that we've covered in terms of essential. The key components of a coaching approach, that individual leaders can begin to model those behaviors. So the way they are with people, the kinds of questions they use, the quality of their listening. So rather than telling people, I'm going to adopt a coaching approach, you don't even need to tell them. You need to be embrace it and model it. And if you begin to model it, that begins to make subtle shifts within the organization. So one individual within a small organization can have quite a profound impact.
Okay, so actually perhaps even telling people you're taking a coaching approach could turn people off, or you're better off just change the behavior and implement programs.
And it's about being consistent with so what are the values that you bring to your leadership role, and then really consistently modeling those. Not simple or straightforward, but can be hugely impactful and profound.
Okay. Rand, okay, if there's no further questions, I don't want to stand between you and lunch, except to mention that the Coaching Essentials course takes place on July the 2nd, where you get to meet Gerry and Kieran in the flesh, and they share their further wisdom with you on that day. It takes place in Clayton Hotel, and the full details are up on ICBE.ie. So it just remains for me to thank Gerry and Kieran for your time and for all your insights, and for everyone who attended today. And if there's any follow-up questions, if you send them into Grania, and I'm sure Gerry and Kieran will be able to deal with them before the event in July. Gerry, Kieran, thank you very much. That was great, and I hope I haven't delayed people from lunch too much.
Lovely. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Owen. Thanks, everybody, for being on the call today. Cheerio.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye.
Bye.